Alright, from some of my recent reviews you might be getting the impression that I'm currently on a Ronin Katana European sword kick. And yes, there are a lot of good reasons for that. The three pieces I'd acquired, they're number 4 Italian arming sword, their number 5 Italian longsword, and their number 9 Type 12 arming sword, I've been pretty impressed and pleased with, especially for the price. They're sturdy, they feel pretty good in my hands, and they come with really nice factory edges. I figured, well, let me take a chance on another one while things are available in stock and the prices are good. So I went over to SBG and I decided to pick a sword that I've been pretty reluctant to add to my HEMA rotation, but I need to be thorough, right? And the reason why I didn't get one of these earlier is because I didn't think it would really suit me, and what I like it is, yes, potentially a cut and thrust sword, but yeah, certain things about it compared to what I figured I'd like better. But then it struck me, one of the things I've talked about over and over is how I've been adapting my previous martial arts and swordsmanship training to HEMA. And I spent a long time with what is considered to be, well, let's say a 20th century iteration of a Qing dynasty Jian design, very common in the Kung Fu and Tai Chi schools. And I figured, okay, so what you got is a minimal guard and then kind of a, this wide pommel. Yes, this does have a longer grip than the average one, but I figured, okay, well, I like this. I've worked with this for decades. Liked it just fine, so why not get, well, that's kind of similar, right? Right? Okay, before we get into it, just got it out of the box a little while ago, took the specs on it, did a little handling to get a sense of it, but let's take a look at that, the Ronin Katana European sword out of the box edge, shall we? Haven't touched this up at all. This is kind of a stout blade, too. I'll take a look at that in a second. But it's all right. A little inconsistent, but pretty good. Okay, so this is Ronin Katana's Euro number 12 Valkyrie Viking sword. Now, Viking sword is not necessarily a historic term, and there are several videos out there by, well, much more popular YouTubers than myself that get into what it should properly be called or not. I'm not going to get into that today, but it varies from their number 8 Viking sword by being slightly shorter, lighter, and they also describe it as having a much more comfortable guard and pommel. Instead of very straight perpendicular guard and pommel, they curved it a bit away from the hand to make it, well, more appealing to people who might be put off by those potential hot spots, which then, of course, appeal to me and my delicate little mitt, so I figured this would be a good place to start as an entry point for me for this type of sword. Now, I've also argued that my real entry point to this type of sword is a Chinese Jian. There are a lot of similarities in initial handling, and I'll get to that in a second. But let's talk about those specs. On the SBG website, they describe this as a 26-inch blade. And by my measurements, it's 25 3/4 inches, which makes it exactly the same length as my Kingston Arms Katzbalger. So it's already pretty familiar. It's a little bit short for a Jian, but not outrageously so. Blade width, 1 5/8 inches. Blade thickness is just under 1/4 inch. And it's a little bit hard to tell with the fuller. Now, speaking of the fuller, it runs the full length of the blade up until about the last couple of inches. And then you can see it's got not a diamond, but a hexagonal cross-section. Okay, kind of pick that up a little bit. The shaping of the blade, the planes, the evenness, everything is pretty well done. There is no secondary grind bevel on that edge, and the edge out of the box is, as Ronin Katana Euro swords have been, it's pretty nice. It's not Katana razor sharp, but pretty close. I mean, functionally close. And it is kind of a thick, stout blade, so I don't expect it to be, that kind of, razor mat cutter. Haven't really taken it out and done any cutting with it, but I did that quick little paper cutting demonstration, and it mostly passed the test. A little bit inconsistent, but not too bad. Other specs on it. You've got 4 1/4 inches of, well, usable grip between the guard and the pommel. Point of balance, also 4 1/4 inches from the guard, so that's nice. Overall weight, 2 pounds, 1 ounce. The website says 2 pounds 3, so mine's just a little bit lighter, shaved shorter than the specs on the website. 1075 steel, everything seems to be solid. Let's take a quick look at the scabbard, which is no terrible surprise as compared to what I've gotten so far from Ronin Katana. You've got leather-covered wood with a stitch seam on the side, metal shape. This one did come with the metal throat that does have the wood position so that, you know, the sword isn't going to rub against the metal during drawing. It has that kind of cheap fake leather hanging system, this time just one belt loop. And it's interesting when the sword is actually in the sheath, and it does fit, well, let's talk about the good and the not so good. It's a snug fit, it doesn't rattle, but don't know if you can see it, but the way that the throat lines up with the guard is not completely even. There's a little bit of a gap in one side, so it's not quite straight. I might be able to adjust that though. But it's snug, it doesn't fall out, and draws pretty smoothly. However, I'm going to take this off anyway, but I figured I'd show it to you while it was on here. The point of balance where they decided to put the hanger has this completely horizontal. It's right perfectly in the balance point of the sword while it's in the scabbard. Yeah, I would think you'd want it canted, maybe a little bit, maybe not, depending on your preferences. But yeah, that's going to go and get replaced with something else. And yes, it did come with the matching belt that doesn't really function as a belt because it's not real leather. It's thin and it's flimsy and doesn't really support the weight of a sword really well without turning over and, you know, doing other uncomfortable, awkward things. But peen construction, it's not their best peening job, but it's not bad. Everything's on there straight, as I said, and tight. Now, I was expecting the classic Ronin Katana European sword leather grip, which has that really nice grippy cord texture and the seam on the side. This one comes with a cord grip. So no seam hot spots on either side. It's a nice oval shape. For my hand, it fits really nicely. And yes, there are some, you know, usually out of the box, a lot of the Ronin Katana Euro swords do have kind of sharp edges on their guards. And sometimes their pommel's not too bad. It's pretty well rounded. But yeah, there's a couple little sharp edges that I might round off a little bit, but everything is pretty solid. The slot in the guard that the blade goes into, it's a bit oversized, which is not uncommon for, you know, Ronin Katana's offerings, but it's not uneven, so not bad. Let's talk about handling. So, reasons I decided to get it. Well, as I mentioned, I kind of like to be thorough in my exploration of HEMA. That said, I have zero training experience practice in using a sword like this, and I do understand you're supposed to use it with some kind of shield in the other hand. Come back to that concept in a second. But similarities to Chinese Jian, and obviously similarities to other one-handed straight cut and thrust swords that I've been studying in my short time practicing, investigating, researching HEMA, there's going to be some crossover. But kind of like the Katzbalger, this allows me a shorter, handier blade that I could use just a bit more freely when I'm stuck inside like I am now because the weather is just not cooperating with me getting out there. Yeah, the lake is starting to fade in the backyard, but it's still pretty cold and wet out there, so I'm not ready to take the equipment out and do any filming yet. I am hoping for better weather. Now, you've already kind of seen me do some Chinese Jian style stuff in terms of what's common in traditional forms, beginning with the blade in the reverse grip in the left hand so that you can do various kind of close range maneuvers with it. and then transfer it smoothly into your primary grip, backed up by your left hand in sword fingers, either moving independently or supporting the sword wrist or the pommel. These are all things I can do very naturally and automatically with this sword. So yeah, I just got it out of the box a little while ago, but handling it like a Jian, absolutely. Thrusting, cutting, maneuvering, yeah, it just works as a Jian for me just right the first time it's in hand. So that's quite nice. So one of the things I'm probably going to get around to doing eventually, since I am not an expert in any form of HEMA, but I have been kind of crossing over skills from other martial arts and swordsmanship, is maybe do some videos looking at the similarities in techniques, handling, and weapons, as well as some of the differences that I'm already, well, discovering. This is just a weapon that seems to appeal. Now, when it comes to using it as a Jian with sword fingers, and I've also been using arming swords and other kinds of swords as Jian, as you've seen in my previous video, I'm starting to realize that a lot of the movements that were associated with sword fingers make perfect sense if you have something else in this hand. So not just to keep this hand lively and sensitive and out of the way of danger, and also some techniques that you can use to support your primary hand with a one-handed sword. But I'm also discovering there's a lot of techniques from those classical forms that I've practiced forever that would make perfect sense if I had a dagger or a shield in this hand. So you're probably going to be seeing some of that. But I can certainly work some of the arming sword, side sword, other kinds of techniques with this weapon. It doesn't have necessarily the reach and the lightness of the tip to thrust, but you absolutely can. There's an argument that one of the influences to this design was the spatha, which is basically a longer version of the gladius, which was used with a shield to do, well, a lot of stabbing with. You can also argue that the shape of the guard favors more of that hammer grip versus the handshake grip, but since they've been making modern reproduction Viking swords with slightly longer grips, and this one is curved a little bit more away from the hand, yeah, I can get it into an arm extended handshake like that. I just need to adjust my grip so that the pommel slides into that space in the heel of my hand. And it gives pretty good retention as well. The core grip is very grippy, at least so far. Like I said, I haven't used it a lot, but I feel like I've got some serious control, positive grip on this blade. So yeah, really kind of liking it. And considering the weight, balance, length, feel, I'm glad I got it. I paid $265 US at SBG, plus just $20 shipping in this country. I don't know how much that would cost you if you're overseas, but yeah, for the money, you can actually get the same price at the Ronin Katana website directly. Don't know about the shipping, but $265, which makes it $10, $20 less than some of the other swords I picked up. I feel like I got a pretty good value. I'm quite pleased with it so far. So you'll probably be seeing more of this in the various kind of comparison rotations that I have planned in the future. Until then, let's get our conversation going. Give me some advice on the use of this style of sword. If you've got any experience with it, or can send me any resources, links, or anything like that. Really curious about learning more about traditional use of this particular kind of weapon as compared to other kinds of European swords and other swords in other cultures. Happy to answer any questions you might have about this one. If you also have a sword like this that you like, tell me about it, or a sword like this that you don't like, tell me about that one as well. I do value our conversations more than I can tell you, so let's keep that going. Otherwise, until next time, as usual, thanks for watching, following, subscribing, liking the videos, and I do hope to see you back for, well, whatever I get myself up to next.